Hello and welcome to the PunkRockHealth podcast. In this episode, we're talking about what it's like to live through a psychosis breakdown with my good friend Tom and his mother Debbie. Tom suffered a drug-related psychosis breakdown which took him and his family on a very difficult journey through diagnosis, recovery and finally back to health. This journey also led Debbie to become a counsellor and therapist herself, so we're joined by her today not only for the family perspective but also to gain some further insights into mental health while she and Tom recount the events up to, during and after his breakdown. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised on this podcast, there'll be some details at the end of the episode where you can find some help. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this honest and brave conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Tom and Debbie with us.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. And we're going to be talking about mental health, which is such an important subject in our climate at the moment, in our world.
It definitely is.
It really is.
Things that we don't talk about enough, in my opinion.
It's talked about quite a bit. It's just still slightly stigmatised, which is a bit of a problem, It's... I mean, especially in the political climate that we're in at the moment, it is kind of subjugated and almost used as a weapon in certain sections, especially when you're online and places like that. I've been in conversations myself where it's been used against myself or used against other people, and yes, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think good conversations working towards positive understanding is important, rather than, like you say, stigmatised and misunderstanding or wrong ideas about.
Well, it can actually increase the problem for the person as well. So, for instance, with my own experience, you begin to hide and hold stuff in, especially when you think other people are going to think differently of you because of it. And it can affect your own mental health because you're constantly got that worry of this might happen to me.
It's constant work, constant mental work.
It is, and that can be exhausting, absolutely exhausting. I think you've always been quite open about what happened to you.
Yeah, so just to address...
Let's
address this.
Fill in the conversation we're having here.
Yeah, so... Obviously, Kelly is training to be a counsellor herself.
I am. It's
I
true.
didn't know that.
I too am a secret agent.
Are you a secret agent?
I too am a secret agent, yeah.
We're talking about secret agents and being visible.
So, my mother here is a counsellor already.
Yep.
By the way, my mother.
Hello.
And then there's myself I had drug-related psychosis. So, for people who don't know, that's basically my brain stopped making a certain chemical which made me see reality in a certain way.
Wow, that's terrifying.
The best way I can describe it is, have you heard of the SCP universe? So it's an online story thing.
Oh yeah.
There's a story within that where there's a character called the Reluctant Dimension Hopper. Yeah. And that is the best way of describing it, because you are literally 1 second your reality around you is one way, and then it is a completely different way. So my perception of the world around me was breaking down. I think we'll probably have to go back to the beginning to sort of understand it, go in the conversation.
Absolutely.
But it was, you see things, you hear things, and they steamroll, basically.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when it first happened to Tom, when Tom wasn't living at home, he was living in London, and us as a family didn't really have any concept of mental illness. I didn't train to be a counsellor until after all of this happened. So, so one night we got there was a message on my phone. Tom had left it
I think it was like 3 o'clock.
I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, but I didn't pick that message up until 7 o'clock the next morning. And he'd left the same message on his stepdad's phone, my phone, his sister's phone. And basically it was, he just said, I'm scared, I need to come home, I'm scared. And it was, you could hear the fear in his voice. And it made all my hair stand up, and it was awful. I didn't know what was happening to him. I just knew that he was scared, and we needed to find him. And then we couldn't get hold of him. So everyone was looking for him, and in the end, I think your dad found you.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but that wasn't till about 11, 12 o'clock.
I can't even remember. One of the problems with it is that my perception of what was happening was so broken that I can't actually even remember certain aspects of what happened. So I think I have to go back even further. My dad used to own a nightclub, and we basically run it. It was during the recession, so there was a lot of problems with keeping clubs and bars open at the time. We were quite a large club and thought we were safe because we had a capacity of, I think it was 300 people per floor, 4 floors, so we were quite large. But we wasn't. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and the club did eventually actually go bankrupt. But it was, we were doing dodgy things to try and survive. So there was a lot of people coming into the club and dealing within the club, and we were allowing it, and they were giving us drugs in return. So I was basically, there was parts where I was literally sticking my head inside the dishwasher at the club to do a line of care, so I could keep my energy up behind the bar to keep serving this 300 people on the floor.
Gosh.
And I was smoking at the time, I'd say between 20 and 30 pounds worth of cannabis a day.
That's
I was
quite
literally
a lot.
So I was literally
And it
going
was,
to the
it
roof.
was skunk, wasn't it?
It was skunk as well.
It was so strong.
So I was literally going to the roof of the club and smoking a joint. I'd have about 8 whilst I was working.
Gosh.
And yeah, it built up and built up, and I'd be counting up the tills smoking and doing lines and just keeping that going basically. I think it was probably the MD that threw me over the edge, because I was literally a cocktail of drugs. I wasn't paying my rent. I was living in a 1-bedroom place in Hackney, and it was basically, there was multiple people living in this place, and I stopped paying my rent because I was paying for the drugs. I don't know if my mother actually knows this, but I spent a couple of days on the street trying to avoid, literally almost homeless, because I was trying to avoid the landlord because of rent. I then moved into a squat, which was not the nicest environment. I mean, when I moved in there, I was carrying my stuff up the stairs, and one of the stairs collapsed through. It was not the best place. We were literally stealing water and electricity from next door, where one of the guys had gone through next door at the bottom and linked it all up. And I was not eating right either. So because I didn't have the money, because I was spending it on drugs and things like that, I was literally eating a special fried rice a day to get all of the protein from the eggs and meats and stuff like that. And that was all I had. That was literally every day. And I lost a hell of a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Which, when you're already a cocktail of drugs, that's not good for the body at all.
No.
And I reached a breaking point. So where we were doing all these dodgy things, my body wasn't healthy and all of this. I went to the club and I managed to get a group of people to come down to the club, and I thought, great, I've got more people come in. It was a friend's birthday, and I was chatting to this guy on the train. I was saying, look, we got a legal rave upstairs and all this, which we're throwing as an after party. And the guy turned out to be a undercover policeman. And that's when my mentality started changing, because suddenly I was the reason the club was closing down.
Oh, wow.
In my mindset,
It
wasn't
not in reality, but
not in reality. The guy
perception of the situation shifted.
I mean, the guy was off duty. I don't think he really understood, because he was already drinking and stuff like that. But in my mentality, that was the thing that happened, and I started panicking. And because we had the gangs and drugs in the club, I started thinking that my family were in danger. If the club closes down, those gangs are going to go after my family and stuff like that.
Escalated.
And that's when the phone call happened. And as you say, you didn't know where I was. Yeah. I don't remember where I was.
So obviously, I mean, I didn't know a lot of that. So we're here in Brentwood, living our cosy little life, and I thought Tom was okay in London, living in the flat that he wanted to live in, working for his dad, and then got that phone call, and then obviously we were really scared because he was scared and we couldn't find him. So that was the start of it. We found him, and I think your dad took you around to my mum's, which I didn't want to happen. I didn't want my mum involved, because I thought Tom's just taken a lot of drugs, and we need to get him home.
And that was another thing as well. My nan at the time was going through cancer.
She'd just been diagnosed.
Oh, wow.
So I had a lot of stress, a lot of emotions at the time. I mean, my parents had been divorced for quite a while. I mean, we were quite middle class when when we were living in Chingford. But then when they got divorced, we ended up at the point where we were sharing the bed in my nan's place. So my nan meant a lot to me, because she was the one who took us in afterwards. We had a bunk bed where 3 of us were sharing between us, and that was at the same time I was changing schools and things like that. And it was just everything built up to that point, really. And I needed help, and my main concern was my family at the time. Yeah. I was worried that they were going to get hurt because of something that I'd done.
And your reality was very blurred by then.
Yeah, by then.
So we so I went to pick him up, and he got in the car, and you know, he was obviously scared. He was saying things that I had, you know, no idea about, and I was like, I don't know if this is real or not. He was talking about gangs and how he was in trouble, and is Oscar okay, which is his little brother. You know, I've done something to hurt Oscar, I've done something to hurt Maxine, and I was like, what? You know, they're okay. I know they're okay, but you know, what has he done? It was quite scary, but I just thought, you know, we'll get him home, get a good meal inside him. Yeah, he can calm down,
sleep it off,
calm down from whatever he's taken, and he'll be okay. But I was very wrong. So, he came home, and then, as does happen with people that experience psychosis, you know, they're trying, like he said, that sort of mental exhaustion of trying to keep it all together. When they actually do get somewhere that they feel safe, they can let go of that, and then obviously the floodgates open.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was quite scary.
Wow. So in fact, instead of it kind of clearing up, what you expected was like a clearing in all this behaviour, and to kind of get to the bottom of what's really going on between what he said and, you know, what the actual storyline of that was, into less kind of connected ideas.
What is going on? And it was, and I did, by then I did know what was going on, because I think I'd watched a program. I think I watched a program about a skunk and psychosis, and I knew that Tom smoked, and I just thought, oh, you know, and then it's really scary, because I didn't know, you know, my lovely, funny, gorgeous boy was completely different. And not being rational, not being, you know, mad, basically, completely.
Well, it starts to escalate to a point where you're making irrational decisions based on irrational thoughts. So there was a point where I'm thinking it wasn't just gangs, it was then starting to become something else. So it's almost like a governmental secret society is all of this. And I remember whilst I was on in this section, I came down here and we had 2 PCs. It was my PC, which they'd taken from the squat and brought here, and we had my mother's PC, and they was actually set up just over there. And I'm thinking of ways that people can get to my family and get to hurt them, and I'm thinking they're going to blow up the computer. So I remember grabbing both PCs and going into the garden and sitting in between the 2 PCs because I didn't know which one had the explosive thing in it.
Yeah.
And you came down and you're like, what are you doing?
It was Nick, wasn't it? Nick came down because by then we're all on high alert because Tom is, you know, he's pacing, he's agitated, he's telling us that there's aliens coming, and
there was the whole thing with I thought that my family at one point the worst part for me was when I even started distrusting my family. So there was a point where I'd thought that cannibals had eaten them, taken their skin, and were wearing the skin of my family to trick me or experiment on me, and it was just snowballs and snowballs, and it's one irrational thought to another. There was a section where I remember when we were going to the hospital for me to be diagnosed. When we get not to the hospital, to the doctors, and I thought I was a robot that was being taken to get shut down. So it's literally, it could be one thing that just triggers these different thoughts. So it could be a billboard that you drive past and you see a certain word, and that means so much to you that you start thinking of it irrationally, and you start taking that on to the persona that you're building to try and...
It becomes the root of your whole new reality.
Exactly.
Take a little seed from somewhere and you build a reality around it almost.
It's... What you've got to remember is it is a defence mechanism of the body to actually react in this way. And you're trying to rationalise things that don't seem to make sense to you because they don't make sense at all. You're trying to rationalise something that has no rationality. So it's a tough area to be in. I remember when you were taking me to the hospital, and I'm thinking there's you can see it visually as well. So I'd seen something online where it was about a super colony of ants, and suddenly that super colony of ants is the thing that's actually attacking. So that's in the electronics because they're underground and they're biting the cables and they're controlling what's going on.
So he would say some really strange stuff. So, you know, he'd say, it's the ants, the ants are getting us, the ants are going to get you, we're being assimilated. I think there was a lot of the stuff.
I'm a very sci-fi loving person.
You had plenty of it in there already.
Yeah,
there was loads in there already.
It doesn't help that our Maltese family name is Borg. So that really didn't help.
Yeah. So we were cyborgs. But yeah, I mean, Tom was, he had a lot in there anyway. It was really good at creative writing. You were, you liked that sort of stuff anyway, didn't you? All the sci-fi stuff. So all of that came out. Yeah.
But as I say, it's like 1 minute you're in one reality, the next you're in another.
Channel
and it's like literally you're jumping dimensions. So 1 second I'm talking about the ants, and suddenly something switches and it's the robots again, or it's just got out of hand. And it starts off as something so small as thinking it's a gang after me, to suddenly I am you almost, in your own mindset, you become like Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah. You're the centre of a conspiracy or the centre of a plot. Or
Exactly. And it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
It really is. And
it was hard getting help.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how long
it was
did
really
it
hard.
play out before you were like...
So the time that we went to the GP was one of the worst ones. So we turned up at the GP and they told me I was faking it. It wasn't, no, not in
we
exact
ended
words.
up with a really old GP who it was just awful because the doctor's is only up the road from here, but I had to walk. Tom had to try and get him to the GP, which was, he was on the high alert, on the lookout all the time. He was, trying to...
my neighbour had fallen over at one point and he had a black eye. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I thought the gangs had got to him and beaten him up. And
Yeah.
he's a vicar. He's a vicar or a
minister.
Minister. Like, so suddenly it's the church that's affected it.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it's just such a rational thought, and it's finding the rationality again, which is one of the hardest things for coming out of it.
Yeah.
And as we say, going back to the GP, we went to this guy.
Well, yeah, first of all, getting someone that is psychotic anywhere is really difficult. And also, what has to be said is you don't know what these thoughts are telling him. So he had voices telling him that he needed to sacrifice himself to save us. So there is a very, very real threat of suicide or self-harm.
Well, this is another thing with mental health. Someone who's going through that is more likely to hurt themselves than anyone else around them. I was actually the reason I would have hurt myself, and I eventually did, which we'll get back to. The reason being was because I wanted to protect.
So that's another sort of really stigmatising thing around people with severe mental illness is that they're psychopaths and they're going to kill someone, but they're much more likely to hurt themselves. So anyway, so getting him to the GP was really hard. Got him to the GP. We walked in, and he said, "Well, you must be Thomas, but who are you?" to me. And I said, "I'm his mum." And he said, "I don't see 21-year-olds with their mums." So I was like, "No, I understand that, but Tom's not making much sense, and I need to tell you what's happening. I think he's psychotic." And he said, "Oh, what, in your learned opinion?"
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah. But, you've got to understand also Tom was saying things like, Mum, he's going to assimilate you. He's an alien. He's,
I was being very irrational.
Yeah.
And I was like, you see? So he started asking Tom questions. And obviously Tom was fluidly psychotic.
And I thought I was a robot who was about to be switched off, so I started saying other things against it because I thought this guy is the one who's making the decision. So I'm then pretending to be okay.
Yeah, so he doesn't switch you off.
Yeah. And then I think after that...
He kept asking you if you were in trouble with the police, which really annoyed me because we'd gone there for help and he kept saying, "Are the police after you?
About drugs
Are the police after you?" And I was like, "No, the police are not after him. He needs some help." And then I think he asked you...
Which didn't help.
He asked you if you'd taken drugs, and Tom reeled off a list. As long as that's the other thing. It was like it had a truth drug, so it didn't care that I was sitting there.
Wow.
He reeled off.
I literally said.
He said
pretty much everything I'd done in that last week.
And you also said, "And I've had unprotected sex." So, okay.
I did say it's going to come out. Like, did I?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Conversations not to have
Yeah.
with another.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh.
So anyway,
He should have known you weren't well at that moment, shouldn't he, really?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So the upshot was the doctor was useless.
Yeah, and then we came
and he
out...
sent us out with a flea in our ear. basically said, you can't take drugs and then expect to come here for help.
You're kidding me.
And I said, what, how are you going to help us? You need to help us. And he said, we've got a psych lady that comes every 2 weeks. I'll write a referral letter.
So you could have been waiting up to 2 weeks?
Oh,
with your son sort of having that problem?
So we came out of there, got him home, don't know how, but got him home, and then I was just distraught. I was collapsed.
So
and then my cousin was a psychiatric nurse at that time, and I phoned her, and she was bloody brilliant, wasn't she?
Yeah, Jo is fantastic.
My cousin, who's my hero, came round and she took him in a room and spoke to him, and she came out and she said he's really very sick and needs help now. And she said, you need to phone the early intervention team. That's what they were called then. And she gave me a number, told me to call them, but I wouldn't have known that if she wasn't a psychiatric nurse.
What do people do if
so
they don't know this?
You're going to the place that you think is going to help you, and they didn't. So
I don't think I really got the help I needed until the straightener incident.
Right, okay. Well, that's a bit fast forward. So anyway, I phoned the early intervention team, and luckily a lady called Heidi Webb picked the phone up, and she was a psychiatric nurse within the early intervention team. They're called something different now, but I'll let you know at the end where you can go for help.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So she picked the phone up. I said to her, I think my son's psychotic. I don't know what to do. I need some help. And she asked me what was going on. I told her that he was, could see things, and he thought that aliens were coming for us, and he thought that we was part of a conspiracy theory. And she said, oh yeah, it does sound like he is.
There's conversations where we were literally in a room having conversations, and I'm hearing and seeing the person in front of me saying something completely different to what they were actually saying.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest examples would be when I felt Sue was saying I wasn't enough. So my auntie Sue coming into a room and everyone's standing around just having a chat, and I just remember her just being like, you're pathetic, not enough, and all of this, but she wasn't saying that.
No.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even the words coming out of her mouth, it was something completely different. But
anyway, so Heidi said, I'll bring a doctor round and we'll come do a home visit we'll be with you within 4 hours.
Brilliant.
Like,
good.
And when they come, I could have kissed them. It was, and they said, they were
fantastic.
He was really ill, but if he would agree for them to work with him, to take some medication, and then he wouldn't need to go into hospital. And he did. Thank goodness. Tom did everything we asked him to.
I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping. I was literally fighting myself to stop myself from sleeping because I didn't want anything bad happening whilst I was asleep. And that obviously makes it worse. It's part of the
sleep
same
depravity
snowball.
on top of all of that is.
Well, it was unbelievable actually, because they did give him some like sedatives and some sleeping tablets, and he had so many of these in his system, and he would still fight it. His eyes would be like really bloodshot, and I'd
diluted.
be
I was literally fighting myself from going to sleep, like pacing up and down, like tensing.
Because
I didn't want to go to sleep because I didn't want anything happening whilst I was asleep, because my brain was already thinking irrationally. It was already thinking, this is happening now whilst I'm awake. So if I go to sleep, I'm going to wake up and it's going to be a completely different scenario, and I'm not going to know what to do, and I need to stay focused.
And also the whole family is affected because no one gets any sleep, because we're all scared that he's going to do something to himself, or that he's going to, like the incident with the computers was about 5 o'clock in the morning,
It was early, and I was sitting in the garden for quite a bit. I think it was like 3
he'd been
o'clock when
sitting
I
out
got
there.
out
It was pouring with rain, and he was sitting in
waiting,
the garden
waiting for one
with the
computer to
computers.
explode.
And so I think Nick came down and just sort of, but Nick was really good actually, wasn't he? With you,
He was always very calm.
Always, talk you down and calmed you right down.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
He was definitely a shining force.
Yeah. So yeah, there was all stuff like, I mean, it's all very mixed up, but this went on for a long time. So we're talking.
About how long?
Well, so the early intervention team work with young people for up to 3 years.
Right.
And Tom did have
I
had
did
3
have the whole
years
time.
with them.
Wow.
I think in the first year
Was it?
you started to be
Was
to
it
get well.
instantly that I went down to Basildon?
So what happened is Heidi became Tom's care coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So and at the beginning would come around every day and work with him and us as a family, which was so important because obviously everyone's broken because of it. I think Oscar.
They say it's not a disease that passes on, like it's not infectious and all of this. But if you're in, it's almost like a radiation. So if you're in exposure of it all the time and you're close to it all the time, eventually it's going to affect your own mental health, and it does wear you down.
I think Oscar was 11, just started secondary school.
Maxine was going through
and he
her
was
GCSEs,
he was
wasn't
a
she?
really confident kid, and then all of a sudden he was like, getting rashes and feeling nervous and not wanting to go to school.
That's a difficult age as well, 11, isn't it? It's a lot of change for
absolutely.
them.
So that had the effect on him. Maxine was exactly the same. She was covered in eczema and worrying about all of us.
No, I do. I hold a lot of guilt with that because obviously it was something that
we don't want you to feel guilty about that. Yeah.
I know you don't, but of course I'm going to. It's part of mentality. It's part.
I think at the beginning,
at the beginning, I should have felt guilty
because I was actually shit scared that my son wasn't ever going to be back to being who he is.
Yeah.
But I think Max certainly was like, you idiot, what have you done? You could have, why did you do all that? Why did you take all those drugs? Why did you?
Yeah, Maxine.
She got quite angry about it, but she was scared as well.
I do feel that me and her are only just mending the relationship from it. It is that's always been a tough one with me and her, and I do feel that we are only. I'm looking at the tissues now. But
But you know that she loves you very much, and it was just like, she was scared.
And often anger is fueled by worry and frustration and, all of that. You kind of, anger's an easier one to do. So if you're worried and sick with worry and frustrated by it, it's easier to be like, well, what you gone and done that for than, it's a kind of, especially at 15, 16.
Well, Oscar was that. She was
17 or 18.
Yeah.
She was going for her GCSEs.
So
was
16.
She was doing exams.
Because
I remember she was doing exams at the time.
I can't remember because
it may have been college.
I think a lot of it I've blocked out because it was pretty bad.
That trauma really does spread across everybody,
Yeah.
So we ended up going to Basildon Hospital, and at the time I was going through what I'm calling the ant universe. So I remember going up to the hospital and I could literally see giant ants standing behind it, and it's quite a demonic sort of scene to me. You go there now, it's a lovely hospital, but in my vision, that's not what it was. And we went in there and we signed me in to actually be on the ward and in one of the rooms, and as they signed me in, I signed the paperwork, everyone left, and I remember the nurses came with more paperwork for me to sign, and I didn't trust it because I was like, no, other people were here before and they can verify my dyslexia. I'm going to start panicking. I don't know if this is what it actually says. I'm not going to sign it. And it ended up with me signing it, and then straight away they took me through to my room and they locked the door, and I'm in a room with bars on the windows and I can hear screaming from other patients from down the thing, and that was awful. I thought I'd signed myself to be locked in this box forever and not let out.
That's so frightening.
And it is a frightening experience. I mean, the mental health facilities that we have do need a bit of reform, because it's kind of like, this guy's going through a really bad situation. Let's put him with everyone else who's having that bad situation.
That same thing,
That didn't really... That you play off of other people's things as well. So I remember being in the hospital and someone being in there who looked like someone that I knew, and suddenly it's like, oh my god, it's happening to them as well. And we were literally having a chat. I was having a chat with this girl who I thought was my friend. I didn't ask her the name, I didn't ask anything, but we were both like, oh my god, like, you're in here as well. Oh, you're in here. No, it's someone else's thing. And you panic, and then I'm sitting in front of a dark, literally I remember going down the hallway and I'm sitting facing these doors where it's obviously part of the hospital that's closed off, and I'm waiting for whatever's on the other side of those doors to come through. And you literally, it seems so irrational and so erratic, but at the same time so fast paced that you don't know where you are, even though it's probably a couple of hours. It feels like it's in seconds.
Yeah. And how long were you there for?
In that hospital in Basildon? That was an assessment unit.
Yeah, the assessment unit was, you're supposed to only be on there for 3 days. I think you were there for about a week.
Yeah.
So that's hard because they're assessing, but when you go and visit, it's like no one's doing anything. What's happening?
So they're not treating anything because they're trying to see what they're dealing with. Right.
So that was quite tough. There were some funny bits along the way as well. There was some, when you look back, it was like when you planted an apple car.
I don't even remember why I did that.
You used to sit in they had
a greenhouse courtyard thing,
and there was a greenhouse, and you used to go and sit in the greenhouse, and
because I thought that something better than myself would grow out of me if I died. That was one of the things. I thought if I sat in the greenhouse that at least some form of my essence would come back, and I remember that's why I planted the apple, because I thought I was going to die in there.
Gosh.
Yeah. So that it was dark, it was scary, but then some of his behaviours and what he did were. Yeah.
I mean, the reasoning behind it isn't funny, but at the same time, when you actually look at the scenario that you ended up in.
Yeah.
So again, we have to go back to it, the self-harming.
Right. So he was in the assessment unit for about a week, and then got discharged home because he had agreed to take the medication, and Heidi and the team were coming around every day, so he was being treated but here. So that I don't know timelines, to be honest, but a few weeks.
It's been a few weeks. I had been taking the medication that I was being given, that had been prescribed. I was having different reactions, so my weight was fluxing up and down. I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. I was still sleep deprived, and we came here, and my father had come over, and he at the time I found out the club was closing down, not because of what had happened with me, but it had been on and off for a long time. And I just remember my dad went like that, just scratched his face, and I thought, that's the game. That's them telling me that I need to go do something.
Yeah.
And all he'd done was a little movement like that, and I'm thinking, they don't want me to be around. They don't want me to reproduce that. No, they want me basically as a slave. So I ended up going upstairs where my sister had left some hot hair straighteners on the side, and I tried to castrate myself with a pair of hair straighteners. Which they say that madness is repeating the same thing over and over again and
expecting different results. Yeah.
I won't be trying that again.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Mate.
yeah. Luckily, it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad.
Okay, it was awful. But I remember sitting in the hospital, and it's as you say, it's.
So you tell your experience of it, and then I'll tell my experience of it, because I was saying to Kelly earlier, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but we all experienced it
completely
very differently.
I say
yeah.
it wasn't too bad because there was no damage done.
No permanent damage
done.
You need to get that out there, don't you, Tom?
For anyone who's listening.
So the thing is that I hold on to that because for a long time I used to say it was an ex-girlfriend or something like that because I was embarrassed of that, but it's part of me. Yeah. I've got to accept that it was me that done that to myself.
It's part of your story, you have to own it.
Yeah, which is kind of why I wanted to actually say it, because I think I've told you that he was an ex before, and I've told multiple people that it's
what you made up a story about.
Yeah, because I didn't want to accept it was me. So yeah, it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
And I just need to own it because it was myself, and it was probably the tipping point where I went, this is madness. I am mentally ill. This is not something that I should be thinking or doing.
Do you feel like that kind of cut through the mist a bit then, that you were whoa, hang on.
They say about hitting rock bottom, but that wasn't a rock bottom moment for me. No. Because I remember sitting in the hospital with my mum after I've done this with a big bag of ice or frozen peas or whatever it was, and the doctors and the student doctors and nurses peeking around the corner and like, oh my god, like. Yeah. And I remember thinking, what the fuck have you done? This is not normal.
Wow. Do you remember what you said to me when we were sitting there after all that? We were sitting in A&E. And that's another thing. The A&E experience is pretty horrendous because you've got someone that's psychotic, and you've got people telling you that they've got to be quiet or they're going to get security. Yeah. Well, tell someone psychotic to
calm down.
Calm down. Anyway.
Yeah, understandable.
So we were sitting in A&E waiting for them to see Tom, and there was me and I think your dad came, your father, and Heidi, his nurse, because I phoned her.
You had to phone her instantly.
I'll tell you my experience of it all in a minute, but so we were sitting in A&E waiting and knowing that he was going to get put straight back on the unit afterwards. And you looked at me and you said, Mum, you really need to put some makeup on or something. You're looking really old. You look like Nan. It's like you wanker. Really?
Gosh. It's so weird, those moments in trauma where almost not normality, but it kind of has to, the bubble has to burst for a moment.
And
I'm a massive fan of dark comedy.
Yeah. And there was lots of that.
It was a hell of a lot of that.
Well, I think it's very human to try and find some relief in the trauma with a little bit of humour.
But I think that was as I say, that was the breaking point for me that said that I need to get better. Because I'm no longer being the protective force that I thought I was being. I am being the damaging force. Yeah. And that's when I accepted to go into Worley Hospital, which was round the corner from here. It's now actually been demolished. It's a building site.
I think luxury flats now.
Yeah, that's it.
But can I tell my experience?
Of that
you can. Incident. Yeah.
Go on.
So,
I
it's the same.
don't know
it's
this.
the same, but obviously, I think we'd been to an appointment at the mental health team, and that's why you was here. Yeah, your dad. So, but the thing is, what I didn't know that backstory. So it makes sense now, because every time he was about, you got more agitated.
Because I was thinking of, because it was the club that was being affected, I thought it was the gangs.
Yeah, I ended up having to keep a diary of when, there's spikes in his behaviour
to try and
and
find
stuff,
patterns.
which Heidi had told me to do. And it was always when your father was around that you spiked.
I didn't know you caught the Kettler's diary.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
I don't know, somewhere probably.
I'd like to read it that one time.
Okay. So anyway,
Very wise.
we were sitting at the table having a cup of tea. We'd got back from this appointment, and we were just chatting. You was okay, actually. I thought you was okay at that point, and because of knowing that someone that's psychotic might harm themselves, you do this thing where there's no knives out, everything's away, there's no scissors, there's no razors
You're basically
in the
baby-proof
bathroom.
the place,
You have to do that, so you have to do that for yourself, really. So Tom had said he was going to the toilet, and straight away I thought, oh, is there anything in there that he can hurt himself with? No. Okay. And then he's gone about 10 minutes, and I said, do you want to go and check that he's okay? Because it seemed like it was quite a while. So he was getting up to go and see if he was okay, and then we heard this scream that makes all my hair stand up, and I didn't know what he'd done.
So my sister had been getting ready, so she was in the bathroom. I couldn't go in there. So.
No, she wasn't here.
Why were the hair straighteners on then?
I think you put them on.
No, they were already bloody hot.
Okay. Anyway.
She'd left them on then. Anyway, yeah.
So he'd run upstairs and he went into her bedroom, and he was saying, oh my God, what have you done? And he was saying, I was standing outside the door, and I was too petrified to walk in that door because I didn't know what he'd done to himself. And then I think he said something like, oh my God, it's his cock. And I thought he's cut it off. And it was just awful.
Wow.
And then so he was saying, phone someone, I think he took you into the bathroom.
Yeah. And
then I phoned Heidi, and she said, meet you at A&E, we'll go straight there. And then I knew that it was the hair straighteners.
And I remember I was given all different reasons why I'd done it, because I didn't want them to I didn't want them to think it was the gang, because I didn't want them to worry. And it's like, I'm giving all these random reasons.
Well, it just
wasn't. It just didn't make sense.
Well, like you say, it's a rationality based on irrationality. You know, you're kind of trying
it's a completely different reality, isn't it? Because people that experience psychosis, they, totally believe that that's their reality. That's their reality.
Very Rick and Morty, but without control.
Yeah, without the portal gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's, like I say, different perspectives on the same incident. And then after that, Tom was admitted to psychiatric hospital and was there for 2 months. 3 months?
3 months I was there for. And
that's hard in itself.
Yeah.
The psychiatric hospital is worse than the assessment unit, because they're both different in their own ways. So the assessment unit, I was locked in a room and let out for certain times, and so that you get a bit more control over patient reaction experiences together. I was in a dorm for the other one, and I had some awful experiences in there, but I wanted to get better, and I did actually escape from there once as well.
Turned up at the door. It's like, hello, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And because he was a voluntary patient, I was like, Tom, you got to get back, because let's get you back, because you'll end up getting sectioned. Which at that time, when someone says, you know, you might get sectioned, and you don't know anything about it, that's like a really bad thing. You think it's a really bad thing. I don't want my son to be sectioned.
You may be voluntary, but in your mind, you're not always voluntary.
Right.
Especially when you have to wait for a certain specific time to even go out for a cigarette. And then you have to go down in groups of 3 and all of this. And I remember literally chewing the end of my toothbrush to make a screwdriver so I could undo the bolts on the walls, on the windows. I remember setting up chairs and looking like at drain pipes and thinking, right, if I run, I can smash through that window and I can grab onto that drain and get down. And it's a really horrible experience because you, as I say, you play off of other people's things. And I remember waking up one morning, I had the curtain around my bed, but I was in a dorm with about 15 others, roughly.
Yeah.
And I remember waking up and there was one of them at the end of my bed with a lighter trying to light the curtains.
Oh, wow.
And then when he realised I was awake, he just went like that and went back to like close the curtain back up and walked off. And then I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night.
Of course.
So again, I'm fighting the medication. I'm trying not to
Oh,
sleep.
wow.
You're tucking medication into the side of your mouth because you start not trusting because there's people around you who aren't trusting.
Yeah.
You're taking every little aspect. So the shape of the building was cross-shaped. So suddenly it's a religious thing. Maybe I do have to sacrifice. So I'll lie on the floor in a cross shape, stark bollock naked at whatever time in the morning.
Yeah.
What else was there?
And then I knew that you did that because one of the support workers told me.
Really?
She was quite old.
Oh, she was lovely.
She was lovely.
Yeah. She
She said to me,
found me in the middle of the floor.
Your lovely boy caused the scene last night. Did he?
Oh,
She said, yeah, he was naked, laying on the floor, and I was like, oh, okay.
I was laying on the floor in this cross-shaped building in the middle of the floor, laid out, and she came round the corner and she just went, "Get up and go back to bed." What are you doing? Go on.
They see it all, don't they?
Yeah.
They must, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
What about the guy who tried to run out when I was actually getting out? So when I was actually getting out and going, and they had this door that was a buzzer. I was coming through the door and somebody here, "Close the door! Close the door!"
Oh, yeah.
And I looked behind me and there's this guy legging it for the door. And as soon as we stepped out the door and closed it, you could just look through the window and he started jogging on the spot, turned around and went back to his room.
There were lots of
there was funny characters.
funny moments, and you know, it was the most awful experience for all of us.
One thing I
for
will
you.
say, they need to check the video selection in the common room area, because one of the films that was there was 12 monkeys.
No way!
One of the videos was 12 monkeys, and I remember at that time I was thinking about time travel and stuff like that, and suddenly there's this film about time travel and about the mental ward in it.
Yeah, I have to say it's not really like that anymore.
It has reformed a
The
lot.
hospital that Tom was in was a very old one, and it wasn't very well run at all. And there was lots
great
of
people
stuff
there.
like that.
There was,
yeah.
I mean, one of my, because I'm dyslexic as well, I had summer schools and stuff like that. And one of my teachers, her son, was working there.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
it kind of gone full circle, and then that set me off.
Different trigger.
Yeah, exactly. But that's it. It's about triggers and recognising your triggers and figuring out what's actually helping. So I was on Seroquel XL, which was the drug that was the antipsychotic.
Yeah.
And that worked for me, but it made my weight flux majorly. So 1 second I was huge, 1 second I was very thin. It was...
Yeah, weight gain is can be a problem, but they can counteract that, can't they? So, I mean, we were really lucky because Tom recognised he was ill. A lot of people that are psychotic, because their reality is their reality, they don't think that they are ill, and so don't want to take medication. And there is sort of common themes that run through people's experiences, like conspiracy theories and paranoia. And so, you know, they're not going to take that medication because you're trying to poison them. Yeah. So that's really difficult, and that's, you know, going back to me saying, thinking about Tom being sectioned was like, oh, it's a really bad thing. But sometimes it's a really good thing, because if someone's on a section 3, they can be medicated against their will, obviously, which is not nice. No. But, you know, you can see then that person can get better and then realise that actually this is...
Because it's often a period of time, isn't it, to kind of get them, if once you're on the medication you start to come back around and then perhaps feel like you want to carry on down that journey.
That's
once
right.
You get a little push down that road.
Yeah. It normally takes about 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks before you start
coming back.
And
it's got to be consistent,
really,
which
consistent.
is the trick, is tricky as well.
Yeah.
So
the worry is always that you're going to become ill again.
Yeah.
And this is something I was discussing with my mother actually on the way here. Was that personality and mentality are different things. So I actually gouged myself up a bit more than usual to trigger my mum's response a bit, because she always gets a bit... she always worries that I'm falling back into certain habits, which I'm not. I've now got to the point where I know my triggers, I know what sets me off, I know what makes me think in certain ways, and I know how to rationalise, which is... it's so good to be able to do, and actually knowing yourself once you get there it's a journey.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, it's not just medication. You had some really good people around you, didn't you? You had psychology, you had...
And I've always been into sciences anyway, so to actually get into the neurological side of it, and I was actually having deeper conversations with some of the doctors and things like that who were involved. I'm not going to say I hadn't relapsed. I have relapsed before. There was times where I started on the drugs again, which wasn't good, because I was so paranoid whilst doing it that would probably have pushed me back into it.
Right.
So that's a hard one. There was where I had my accident at work, so I was going through a very bad relationship breakup. I then smashed in my front row of teeth, and my life just wasn't going right, and I accepted the bad relationship back into my life.
Well, everybody does that at some point.
But I was at a breaking point, and I allowed that person to manipulate me in that way. But that again, it's back to normal now. So it's a difficult one. It's ups and downs, and right now I'm probably at a very high point, and I can see where I can see what's my personality and what's my mentality. Do
you have some kind of checks for yourself in place? Have you got a method?
Oh God, no.
To keep an eye on yourself, or
no, it's completely random. It's just kind of, I do like to, if I'm... The internet's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
If I find out new information, I do like to try and find at least 3 other sources of where it's come from. And try and track it back and have a look at try and find out where it's
I think
actually
everyone
come
should do that. I think that should be for everyone.
Source checking is something that you really need to keep on top of, especially in this day and age of such false information that comes out. The Brexit thing has really caused a lot of rifts. I think it's got to the point where, they say that liberal people have more mental health problems, but yet you've also got the whole. It's one of those ones where it is being used as a weapon. I had it the other day where I questioned something. Someone put up a quote about Greta, whatever.
Yeah.
A meme about it, and I just said to them, you're talking about the mental health side of it. Then it got into a thing where they were like, I was like, we're all on the same boat, They said, if I was on your boat, I'd drill holes in it. So I was like, okay, what does that mean?
Bit rude.
So I tried to find out what he actually meant by that. And this was a father of a friend of mine who then started posting pictures of mental health hospitals, knowing full well that I had been in one. And it is used as a weapon against you.
That's horrible.
Really?
This was literally about 2 weeks ago. And it's a tough one, because we're in a situation now where we need to keep the conversation going, and we need to actually scrutinise, and we need to actually talk about these things. But no one wants to, they just want to force their own idea through. Which is why I'm trying to get involved a bit more in politics and things like that, because I see it as important to actually have that sort of right. There are many methods out there, there's many sciences out there that are sort of, something that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked into more and scrutinised itself. So it's one of those ones where it's a high tense situation at the moment. I can see how much it's affecting other people's mental health, not just my own.
Yeah. Time of uncertainty.
Absolutely. And
I think since
I worked in a community mental health team then for 10 years after we went through what Tom went through, and obviously there's lots of stuff about conspiracy theories and world ending and all of that with people that are ill, and it's getting harder and harder to say no, that's not reality, because how crazy everything is at the moment.
Hard to reassure people that have conspiracies or concerns like that.
But you do know, I think Tom's become really good at knowing if he's overthinking something, and you've said to me a few times, it's me overthinking, isn't it?
I know when to pause and take a step back and actually look at something rationally, and it's, as I say, there's so much misinformation and stuff like that. You do have to scrutinise it. You do need to be on top of your game and actually understand that this is not just one person, it's not just a group of people, it's everyone that's going through something. Everyone's got their own struggle.
So Tom, what would you say were your top tips for staying well mentally?
Just absolutely, Kelly's out of the picture now. You're just asking
questions.
I'm loving
it. I was going to say, you guys doing all the work for me.
Because you're experienced at being able to keep yourself
my top tips for keeping yourself well, I would personally say keep an eye on your own health. So, for instance, I wasn't eating properly, I wasn't sleeping properly, I was doing a lot of drugs. I've actually gone to the full hog now. I've actually done a DNA fit test to see exactly where I think my problems are. So I did DNA Fit, which is an online company I think they're from South Africa, and they've actually told me that I have a gene which is switched off, which helps with releasing certain chemicals, which would be why flushing out the I think the cannabis and THC and stuff like that probably was building up in my system. During that time. So knowing yourself to the basic line is definitely something that you need to do.
Yeah.
Self-knowledge is a huge power.
It is.
Physically, mentally, you know.
Talking about how you feel and your emotions, not holding things back, actually being honest, and just get it out there. I mean, you may be wrong, you may be right, but knowing who you are is a major part of it, and don't let anyone get you down. That's the hardest part. I was one of these people who was always happy, but for other people I was holding so much emotional stress back. I was never happy with how my life was. I lived in a flat with loads of people, which was infested with mice, and I didn't like my landlord, and I was never seeing sunlight because I was always working nights. And I always had a smile on my face. I always was trying to be the life of the party and stuff like that. Yeah, it's holding on to that emotion. I think Robin Williams was a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of getting our heads around that, aren't we? Checking in with your smiley friend.
Yeah.
Because those people are often putting up
a
barrier over something, you know.
Yeah, it's the whole mask play sort of thing, you know. It's that's probably my top tip, is just look after yourself. Yes, you can look after other people, but don't put yourself last.
My counselling tutor, one of our first classes we had, he was like, you know, if a plane is coming down and the oxygen masks drop, you've got to put your mask on before you help anybody else, because if you're not breathing, you can't help anybody else.
Exactly.
And he said that's what it is for your mental health as well, and you take on other people's stresses and so on, but it's like the oxygen mask, you need to have it on. You need to be able to breathe.
Self-care is just so important.
Taking time for yourself as well. I think I hadn't been on holiday in 5 years when that happened as well, because I was so focused on trying to keep the club going and trying to keep my friends happy and trying to keep people in the club and happy. I didn't drink during this time. I saw it as wasting stock.
Wow, yeah.
So I did not touch alcohol, but drugs, all num.
Incredibly Moorish, these drugs. Gosh.
Yeah, it was very much like that.
Yeah, I think keeping your health as a priority is important for everybody. Physical health as well, you know, just keeping an eye on, like you say, getting some food and sleeping and get the basics covered.
That was definitely another factor.
It's important.
That was definitely another factor of it. The fact that I was, as I say, it must have been about 2 months where all I was eating was a special fried rice.
You're not getting what
every
you
day,
need.
just one big packet like that.
Yeah. Also, remembering that we all have a mental health, and it's our responsibility to look after it, because we're all that far away if we don't look after ourselves.
Knowing that someone else's ideas and beliefs and things like that doesn't affect yours. It does in a way, but you're your own person.
Yeah.
Make your own. Go for the shirt. I'll do that way.
You have to read it out for the listeners. No gods, no masters.
I'm dyslexic. I can't read upside down. But no gods, no masters. It's just you think for yourself. It is literally, you've got to know that you are you. You are the one in control, and you've got to literally buck your ideas up.
As RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else?
That's so true.
It's so true, isn't it? Yeah. I think also, you know, your story, how this happened to you. Now, I've known you since we were 16?
Younger 17, than that, I think.
Younger than that. So we've known each other a long time. So I know I've known you since before this happened.
For background, we literally lived on the opposite side of the reservoir.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I mean, we were local growing up. So I've known you before and after. I can't remember where I was going with this.
Sorry, that's my fault for interrupting. We've known each other for a long time, and I think you didn't know it. I know you don't know the whole. You didn't
no, I didn't. No,
you were one of the few people, because I did actually lose touch with a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Because people, as I say, it's still stigmatised. It's still people
it's
think
hard,
that, that person's ill. which is not the case. That's when they need their friends.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And you were one of the few people that stayed about during that. I know you didn't know the full thing, but
no, I didn't know.
I think when I said that I'd been
on.
in a mental hospital, so you just went, "Oh, that's cool. Do you want a drink?" Yeah, okay.
I'm a bit like stuff happens. That's kind of my take on it. I'm like life happens, and
Absolutely,
you know, if you wanted to talk more about it, I just would be available.
come
But
up,
if you wanted to say like this happened and move on, I'm like, okay, cool, all right. Well, I'm here for it.
I did have my core group of main 4 friends as well. They stuck through me thick and thin. They're good guys. They all have their own things and old problems, and you know, as we do.
I remember what I was going to say, which is I've known you before and after, and from to you telling the story and hearing how it played out, you realise that, you know, could happen to anybody, but it's a set of circumstances building on top of each other that then creates a break that then you have to recover from. It's not you were, you know, prone to this, or you know, visibly prone to it, you know, your whole life or so. Do you know what I mean? It's a collection of circumstances that happened around you, and there shouldn't be any shame in it, is what I'm saying.
It is a complete section of selection of circumstances that create that scenario. For me, it does seem to have been genetic. It does seem to have been the lifestyle, and it seems to have been just general poverty at that time. Yeah. I wasn't the richest person at all.
The right sort of cocktail of circumstances and influences could bring stuff out that would surprise all of us in ourselves. You know,
Tom had a drug-induced psychosis, but it doesn't have to be drug-induced. No. You know, you can become psychotic having a baby.
Exactly.
Postpartum psychosis. From being very stressed, from burnout, from illness, from taking some sorts of medications. There are lots of things that
there's many factors.
A psychosis.
Yeah. So I mean, it really shouldn't be sort of stigmatized in that respect. It's like, because really these situations could pile onto somebody and change them, any one of us. So, you know, being aware of it, talking about it, opening things out for, you know, other people to come forward and say, this is kind of piling on me, and that being all right can probably help all of us. Absolutely. You know, to create a world where we feel like you reach out sooner, you know, and that's easier for everyone. Because it really could happen with the right circumstance, the right cocktail of stuff, to any one of us, really.
Yeah, it
you
can.
know, I mean, Darren Brown's proved that, hasn't he? When he takes a group of people and gets them to a point where they push someone off a roof, you know, he does. You know, the right circumstances, the right coaching, you can get surprising stuff out of people. Yeah. You know,
I think you got someone to shoot Stephen Fry on stage. You know, it is. And I think that is used in politics now as well. Yeah. It highly is. I mean, we look at the tragic scenario of, was it Joe Cox?
The MP.
The MP who was shot and thing, but he's not said. I mean, they've not said that it was a mental disorder or anything like that. But he was pushed in a situation where he thought that was the answer.
That was the way.
And that is what happens to people, especially when you've got such a media presence now, online, on TV, on the radio. You can't get away from those sort of situations. It's something that really needs to be addressed.
I think what you said about kind of knowing yourself and being in touch with who you are is a real key to staying, you know, not going down that road with what you're influenced with. Knowing what is you and what's other people's ideas is quite important, and to kind of look at your introjects and figure out where your beliefs and values are, and you know.
Absolutely.
Well, there's the concept of the echo chamber, the bubble that we all live in, and in a way, it's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes you need to get away to that echo chamber to know who you are.
Yes.
But at the same time, you need to have that outside interaction to be able to change your ideas and
challenge them,
adapt them, and change.
I really think it's something we should do, you know, with our young people as they go through school, that there should be some part of the curriculum that's a little bit of mindfulness and a little bit of like,
Absolutely.
what are my beliefs and values? Where did these come from? What did my parents teach me? What do I believe? What does society teach me? What do I believe? And discussion around that. You know, I mean, we did loads of it in counselling level 2, the beginning of the counselling journey for me. But there was so much discussion around what we believe, what we value, and debate across our beliefs and values, and it was super healthy and super eye-opening.
Oh, yeah.
I just felt like we should all have it, you know, it should be
Yeah.
for everyone, you know, not just counselling students.
Definitely. And the other thing is, you know, when you know your values, then, and living by them, acting on them, and not letting anyone influence that. But our values can change as we get older.
Absolutely.
And lots of, like you say, you know, whose is this? This is what I've grown up with. Is that what I actually believe?
Does it serve me?
Does it serve me?
Yeah.
Finding out.
I think not knowing who you are, you can end up feeling trapped in a certain scenario as well, in a certain lifestyle, and you can end up forcing yourself to stay in that because you don't want to adapt, you don't want to change, and it's a very sad part of society to be in.
It's a common trap.
It is.
It's a common trap, yeah. I think discussions are great though for like people listening to other people talk about things like this, and being transparent really does help people have a little think about what's going on in their own bubble, in their own echo chamber and world, you know.
That's one of the main reasons.
That allows us to then connect, because we all need
connection. Yeah.
You know.
Isn't that O2's thing?
Is it?
Debbie, you asked Tom what his top tips were for going through or past something like that, and what about you? You were, you know, it was happening in your family, in your bubble. As
I would say don't shy away from stuff. So, you know, that was happening. I think it was very important to, you know, make sure we addressed it. We didn't all run away from it
under the carpet.
Yeah. And you know, getting help quickly is really important in psychosis. So, and that's not always easy. So, get help quickly, and then just face it. You know, really face it. And then when you know, like we were just talking about, when you know who you are, what values are, and when you know that you might, you know, you've got that sort of vulnerability, then you need to take care of that. So that is eating properly, because we all need certain minerals and vitamins for our brain to work properly. So making sure you eat properly, making sure you're out in the fresh air, making sure you walk, run, stay fit, get sleep.
I have to say, I did a lot of walking and running when I was ill as well, to be honest. But,
did a lot of running after you as well.
Mainly from the hospital.
And talking,
Yeah,
big
talking
one.
is a major
one.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to talk. You've got to. You can't
coming out with all the phone.
internalise all that.
That's why they choose them as slogans, because they resonate.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's all about connection. It's about keeping yourself just happy.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going to be happy knowing that people care, and people caring is going to make other people happy.
Yeah.
It's a continual cycle. It's a continual cycle that's needed.
The dog's dreaming. She's dreaming and tapping the table. Bless
So
her.
there is a little dog. Well, I say little dog. She's quite large.
a big dog,
Yeah.
really.
Puppy.
Yeah. Oh, bless. Yeah, but keeping an eye on your happiness and driving towards it is so important in life, because I think like a part of your story is getting focused on keeping this afloat and keeping that afloat, and your happiness wasn't on your list.
No, I was spinning
about
all these plates, but not my
not
own.
your own. Yeah. And we're back to the old oxygen mask again.
Absolutely. You know, because I remember before all of this being on a plane and them saying that and thinking, I've got my 2 little kids here, there's no way, you know, I'm going to get the mask and I'm going to put it on my child. I'm not going to put it on myself first. And then obviously then you realise, well, what happens then if I pass out who's sorting my kids
Who's
out.
putting their masks on for them? No one.
You know,
Yeah.
so it is self-care first,
Yeah.
because you know, all the old cliches, you can't drink from an empty cup.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's about looking after you first.
And this whole, am I right in thinking this whole experience is what drove you forward to wanting to be a counsellor, or
Yeah,
played a part in it?
yeah,
It played a major part.
a major part. I mean,
It was more to do with the fact that the care that she received.
Yeah.
So that's what I see it as anyway. I don't
it
know
was
if you
pretty
see it
amazing
differently.
actually. You know,
So-
the early intervention team, or they're called,
They were SEPT.
what are they called now? E-Step. They're called now. So
E-Step.
So R1 around here. So it's Essex Support and Treatment for Early Psychosis.
So in other areas it will be early support and treatment. No, support and treatment for early psychosis and
Yeah,
your area.
whatever their
Yeah.
trust is.
Yeah.
So the trust around here is called ePut. So yeah, so if you're worried about anyone or worried about yourself, then you can self-refer. So you go on your trust's website, and then there should be a page that is about support and treatment for early psychosis.
Even if you are in a different area as well, you'll be able to find the
find
link.
your way through from
find your
that.
link,
Yeah.
and then you can actually self-refer still.
That's great.
So you can phone that number, and hopefully you'll get an angel like Heidi pick the phone
Yeah.
up,
Heidi's
and you'll
lovely.
get your help.
Straight away.
But
almost.
yeah, so
yeah.
it was Heidi that got me into it. So I was in recruitment at the time, and I was trying to work from home, but obviously I had all that going on. So and I just wanted to keep him safe, so I wasn't worried about talking to clients, and
Yeah.
you know. So actually, I lost my business at that time, and Heidi was coming round. I think we were about a year into it. So, and she said to me, "Oh, there's a job going for a support worker, a carer support worker. So you'd be looking after the families of people that have
Yeah.
got, you know, this mental illness." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I could do that." But she's like, "You'd be really good at it. Like, go for it." And I ended up getting that job. And like I say, I was in that team for 10 years. So supporting people that had gone through the same sort of experiences as we did. And then while I was there, during that 10 years, then I started training, did my counselling training. And the rest is history. But yeah, very much so because of Tom's experience.
Seeing the value in the
and
work. And,
yeah,
yeah.
and knowing, you know, what was important to me.
Yeah.
And
Well, you're always
recruitment's still a people person job, but
Yeah.
it didn't really, you know,
you've always been quite.
it wasn't
empathic,
important
though.
to me anymore.
Always quite empathic though, so you always take on the emotions of people around
Well,
you.
yeah, I think I was meant to do this sort of work anyway. I mean, before I split up with Tom's dad, I was working with handicapped children. Do you remember
Yes,
that?
kids with cerebral palsy. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
so I loved that. That was my...
That was great
Yeah,
as well. 'Cause
I love that. I think
even I helped out then when I used to have
Yeah.
pet lizards. I had a room with about 12 different lizards in it, and I remember coming down with, I think it was some leopard geckos, weren't it?
Yeah, for the kids
For the
to
kids
look
to
at, yeah.
have a look at and
yes.
pet and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I was doing that, and then obviously got divorced, and I needed to earn proper money. So that's how I got into recruitment.
Yeah, 'cause
But it wasn't a passion.
It wasn't a passion, it wasn't a calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to have
Absolutely.
been doing. Yeah.
And I guess with like the experience as well, the first-hand experience of what it's like to go through something like this.
Yeah, we spoke about that earlier, didn't we? About, you know, those sort of people making the best therapists,
The
people
wounded
that have been through
healers.
their own
it's
stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the time, I think from doing the course for counselling, that's of quite a few people's story. 2/3, I'd say, of people that are like, I went through this and I had counselling, I had support, and I really want to do that for somebody else, or share that, or give that light on.
Yeah.
You know, which is
and it's such
important.
an important part of society is actually caring for people
Absolutely.
around. It makes such a difference if people are happy and constant.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to actually look after themselves. I mean, they were looking at before about getting in workplaces, weren't they? On boards, was it not psychiatrists, counsellors on most large offices? And
some
places.
places do have them.
Most places now have employee services.
Sort of help. Yeah, I think. I had a tutor at drama school that was always like, everyone should have a therapist. Just, you should have a doctor and you should have a therapist. Your mental health is important as your physical health. And if your leg hurts, you go to the doctor. If your heart hurts, go to your therapist. Just.
I will say though, because the one thing that stopped me from recovering quicker was that I'm part Irish. So Freud said that the Irish are the only people who are immune to psychoanalysis. So I used to think that. No. I'm not crazy. That was another reason why I didn't get better quicker.
One of my friends, he a long convoluted story that I won't fill you in with, but we were having a conversation about suicide, and one of our friends had threatened suicide, and I hadn't taken it totally seriously because of like a lot of events that had gone on before, and I was like, I don't feel like this is what's going on here. I feel like this is a cry for help, and but more a cry for attention. But he was beside himself about it. And when we got to talking about it, he was like, well, I'm Irish, and it happens so much in our young men. He's like, over in Ireland, cousins, and then their fathers, and that, in our men over there's so much suicide. And he's like, that's why I was frightened, because it seems very possible. He's had his mum's always like, oh, you remember so and so, he's killed himself. And there's a big epidemic for it with their young men. Because there's a lot of sort of stigma, and
it's the same with certain parts of America as well, because obviously they've got the genetic lineage, but it's very prominent over there because they've got such a lot of certain areas feel it. Boston comes to mind straight away. You see it in films all the time. I think even in The Departed they mention the whole Freud.
I don't know if it's cultural or how what's sort of culturally acceptable. If there's if the young men aren't encouraged to talk so much. I mean, one of my friends was talking about when he lost his mother, and one of his uncles said, "Don't you cry," to him. Stuff like that. That it's that kind of culture that. I think creates a bit of...
It goes back to what I was saying about personality and mentality are different. Knowing yourself and knowing who you are and how you dress and what you like and things like that is completely different to your mentality on situations around you. It's the self that you've built on that, but it's a balance. It really is.
Yeah. But I mean, going back to the suicide and young men, I hope it's going to get much better, because it did used to be boys don't cry and come on, man up, and stuff like that, so men don't talk as much as we do, but I do think that's getting better, and certainly my clients, I'd say at least 50% are men.
I think we're at a turning point with it.
Definitely.
But I do think there is a fatigue around it, which is adding to the stigma.
Yeah.
And it's got to the point where it starts going the opposite way slightly in people's...
You get a little bit of a backswing. If something gets a lot of discussion around it, you get a bunch
like
of people going, oh, not this again. Yeah. Or
it's like the Extinction Rebellion.
Climate boredom we've got. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But things like that.
It needs to be scrutinised. It's the same with Brexit. It's the same with Extinction Rebellion. It's the same with gender equality. You get to a point where people have talked about it so much, and the people who have made up their minds have made up their minds.
They've checked out the conversation.
Yeah. And that's it. And you've got to keep the conversation going, because otherwise you're never going to be able to adapt yourself to it.
Well, you think like when you have a relationship with a partner, and you have to have relationship discussions, not all the time, but fairly frequently, because you got to keep checking in on that conversation. That's not a conversation that ends. When you're in a relationship with somebody or something, the conversation doesn't really end. It has to be checked in with and opened up every now and again. You can't just be like, well, we're in a relationship now and that's the end of it. that's us. We've
That's-
decided it. That's the relationship, you know, and never again shall we check in or communicate. You know, communication's got to
We are
It's
all
got flow.
going. Yeah.
all of us are a work in progress.
Aren't we?
We're constantly evolving, growing,
Absolutely.
changing.
Mm.
So, you know,
And we're all
communication,
different, we're all
communication,
blended, we're all-
communication.
Mm.
It's, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there we are.
I think, yeah.
I think we've covered it. Well, thanks so
Brilliant.
much for joining us today, guys.
No,
It's
thank you
been
for having us.
super insightful, really
Yeah.
interesting, and I
Yeah,
hope
no, thanks. It's good. Really good
Okay.
to actually be able to
It's nice for me to see
both
different
give
points.
our yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, it's been good. I'll
awesome.
put it like that.
And hopefully anybody out there that's concerned about themselves or a loved one or a friend can take something from this to go forward and change for the better, or help facilitate change for the better. And I'll be sure to make sure that there's links in all the descriptions, and
Great.
I'll run off some links in the outro as
Fantastic,
well for
thank you.
things that will help people that are, you know, in similar situations or something like that. So
Fantastic.
some follow up. I'll make sure there's some
Brilliant.
follow up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
So that was episode 7, Living Through Psychosis with Tom and Debbie. Thanks for listening. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this podcast, I have some useful links for you, thanks to our guest Debbie. All of these links will be available on the podcast page of our website, which is www.punkrockhealth.co.uk/podcast. Just scroll down to find the latest episode, episode 7, click through there and you'll find all the details for this episode right on that page. For those of you with a pad and pen ready now, coming up with some links you might find useful. Firstly, we have www.mind.org.uk. We also have www.thecalmzone.net and www.rethink.org. For those of you who want to reach your local NHS service for mental health and early intervention, what you'll need to do is find your local NHS trust. You can do this by Googling the name of your area with NHS trust. So, for example, East Midlands NHS Trust or Essex NHS Trust. And that should give you the details for your local NHS trust. Then you can access their mental health services and look for Psychosis and Psychosis Early Intervention Team. For those of you in Essex specifically, or if you want to access this page to see what this kind of page should look like when you look for your own local trust, here is the very long link for the Essex Mental Health Service Crisis Early Intervention Team. Big breath, here we go. So it is EPUT, that's EPUT, /essex/essex-crisis-support-early-intervention/essex-support-crisis-for-early-psychosis/ But like I said, if you didn't manage to write all that down, it will be detailed on our website, www.punkrockhealth.co.uk/podcasts. This podcast was brought to you by PunkRockHealth.co.uk, a small independent business inspired by health and wellness with a punk rock attitude. You can reach out to us at punkrockhealth@gmail.com or check out our website, www.punkrockhealth.co.uk. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to keep up to date with what we're up to, feel free to reach out to us with any questions and any comments. Thanks again for listening.